Welcome to Groups This Week. As a church, we exist to help all people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. We believe doing life together is a crucial part of that journey. During this time, we're going to unpack and dig deeper into the sermon we heard this past week. Let's dive in as we continue to grow in our faith, knowledge, and love of Jesus together. Well, hey, and welcome, community groups. This past weekend, we started a new series for our summer called Psalms of Ascent, where we're looking at Psalm 120 through to Psalm 134. And we wanted to actually let you know up front that for these videos and discussion guides provided throughout the summer, we are going to be tracking more with the Mariner sermon order, just because there's going to be a lot of jumping around from campus to campus, and things are going to be done out of order. So if you would like to track along with the Mariner order, you're totally welcome to if you're from other campuses, but just wanted to give you that heads up. But without further ado, Pastor Brad,
hey,
you started us off in this series this weekend at Mariner and at Town Center with Psalm 120.
Yeah.
But before we get into Psalm 120, can you just give us like a bit of an overview or a summary of like what are the Psalms of Ascent? What might be helpful to know about this particular collection of Psalms?
Yeah, so the Psalms of Ascent were very much what the title implies. They were songs that were sung by the Israelites as they would make their way up to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, the temple was the highest geographical location in Israel. So you were literally ascending as you went up, and these were a collection of psalms or songs that they would sing together as they made their way. So it was a way of preparing their hearts. It was a way of realizing that they're on a pilgrimage together, not as individuals. And the thing that I was likening it to this week was the idea of, my son and I are big soccer fans, football, the proper football. And if you're a soccer fan, if you're a mild fan, you might show up and you sit down in the seats just before kickoff. Yeah. Or if you're a big fan or an average fan, no, I guess we're big fans. My son and I, we like to get there an hour early, see them kick around. But if you're like a fanatic, this is your lifeblood, this is, let's just say it, your religion or your form of worship, you don't gather just before the game, you gather on the other side of town. Mm-hmm. So like right now during Copa and the Euros, there's a lot of soccer going on in the world right now that makes some of us very happy. But in the Euros right now, you have all the different European teams playing, national league teams. And they'll gather in all their colors on the far side of town, far from the stadium. And what do? Well, they all recognize we're in this together. And what do? As they make their way to their place of worship, they sing songs that they've memorized, maybe carry relics from old things they've won, and they look to the future, hoping that they're going to have more victory. I thought that's a pretty good parallel. And I also have this idea of kind of tributaries of rivers making their way into a larger stream and into a river. And I just picture these, Israelites spread out all over the place, who are making their way up to Jerusalem and kind of making their way through different footpaths to the main roadways, and then gathering together and singing these songs on the way up to Jerusalem, which I think is quite a beautiful
great
image.
Analogy.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it, but it would be the three main ones would be Passover in the spring. It would be Pentecost in early summer, and the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, they call it in the fall.
So you're journeying towards Jerusalem for specific festivals throughout the year on pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now when we zoom into Psalm 120, like the first Psalm of Ascent, can you help us understand like what's the context of this psalm?
Yeah.
What's going on within it?
Yeah. So I mean, we don't get a lot of context. We don't even have a name. We don't have like David's name attached to it, or the sons of Korah. So it appears that it was written initially by an individual, but then thrown into this collection of songs. And it's not difficult to see how the metaphor could work of an individual. So the psalm talks about feeling like we're living in a land full of lies, living among people who are not our own people. It mentions Meshech and Kedar. These are not places in Israel. These are far places that really would represent, let's just be modern day Turkey and southeastern, kind of away from Israel. And they would be kind of representing the Gentile or the pagan nations that were a danger, that were warring with them. And so this is kind of the idea that we're pulling out of the land of lies and making our way towards truth and purity and unity. And so
okay.
I think that's helpful. Yeah.
And as I just recall in this psalm, like we see the psalmist like pleading within this psalm. It's like a psalm of lament, if I'm correct. And what is it that he's pleading for?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. Pleading for safety among the deceptive talkers and those who deceive and those who lie with their lips. But I think he's also calling for justice. But what's interesting is it's not taking justice upon themselves. It's leaving it to God to bring about justice. Mm-hmm. I think where the metaphor is great, even for us, right? Like in the modern world, we would say, is the world hostile towards Christianity? Check. Yeah. Do we feel like we live in a land of lies? Check. Whether it be politics, whether it be media, whether it be ideology, we see ourselves surrounded by lies, and our plea is the same, right? Mm-hmm. Like, save us from this. Keep us pure in the midst of us. Bring us towards you in the midst of this. I think it's and I think near the end there is just saying, we want to talk about peace, but people just keep talking about war. Mm-hmm. And that is what we're called to do. We're called to be peacemakers. Not just as I often say, not just people who proclaim peace, but people who are conduits of peace. Like we want to be providers of peace and hope. Wow. But we'll find, as the Israelites did, and we find now as Christ followers, we're always going to find pushback to that, because we have a certain version of peace, and it's bowing to the Prince of Peace, right? And peace outside of that is only going to be momentary. In the same way that a soccer win is only going to be momentary.
Well said. Yeah. So
it's hard for me to say, but it's true.
By the time people will have watched this, we'll probably know whether Canada's advanced. Canada did. But Brad, kind of as a final question, like how else might this particular psalm intersect with our faith, and how does it encourage us today?
Yeah, well, I kind of mentioned some of it. I think the one that I would want to land on, or maybe two things. One is, it's a pilgrimage. Mm-hmm. It's not a tour. Right. So tourists, and Eugene Peterson talks about this in his book. Tourists just want to look at the highlights. Pilgrims understand that they're on a long haul, doing the long walk. The ups and the downs we're in, and we're going to continue this walk. We don't just check off the Eiffel Tower and whatever else. Right. So that's the first part. The second part, what makes a pilgrimage possible is, one, knowing the destination, and two, knowing that you are a pilgrim among pilgrims. That we do not do this long walk alone. We're meant to gather together, whether it be Sunday singing songs of the truth that we believe, that sustain us, continuing to remind each other that we're walking in the same story, even though we might be surrounded by lies and deception and smaller stories that are dangled in front of us. We believe as pilgrims we're on a pilgrimage together with other pilgrims towards something better. And yes, it's uphill. Mm-hmm. It's we're ascending, so it's a long grind, but the view is beautiful there, and the long pilgrimage is worth it. Yeah.
Well, random question that wasn't included in our script, but I'm just like thinking out loud. Like, do you think that like Jesus and his disciples would have sung these psalms as they entered into Jerusalem for festivals?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. Why would they not have?
Yeah, it's been the tradition, like this is what they know, these are their scriptures, but I think it just puts it in perspective in a different way. It's like, whoa, like...
Yeah, and if they didn't, I'm sure they would have been challenged by a Pharisee.
Right.
So we would have heard about it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, thanks so much, Brad, for helping us understand this psalm a little more and the beginning of the Psalms of Ascent. I do want to mention one more thing. We will have a Psalms prayer and practice guide that is available on our website for you, either as an individual or together in community, to journey through the Psalms of Ascent. So it's pretty simple. It's just got room for notes on each page with the text of each psalm written out, and then a simple prayer prompt that you can be praying for, either as a group or on your own, and a practice that you can implement. And so that's available on our website. And so you can engage in that way throughout the summer, wherever you are, whether you are on vacation or if you're together with your community group. So we hope it blesses you, but we'll see you next week. We hope you enjoyed the teaching today. If you're wanting to follow along with our community group's discussion guide with your group, you can head to cachurch.ca/media, where you can find the discussion guide. Not only are there questions there related to the sermon, but there's also prayer prompts that relate to the passage or the topic that we were talking about, and practices that you can, on an individual level or a group level, begin integrating into your life to not only bring this knowledge into your mind, but to begin living it out.